Support for this episode of Philly Who comes from Fringe Arts. Coming up this September 5th through the 22nd, Fringe Arts presents the 2019 Fringe Festival, featuring over 1,000 artistically daring performances, exhibitions, digital works, late-night parties, and more across Philadelphia. For more information, visit fringearts.com.
I was thinking, you're about to become the mayor of the fifth largest city in the United States of America, birthplace of freedom, liberty, and democracy. Holy.
You're listening to Philly Who, the podcast that tells the stories of the doers, thinkers, and performers of Philadelphia. My name is Kevin Schmidlin, and today I'm sitting down with the 98th mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter. When Mayor Nutter decided to run for mayor, the odds were stacked against his campaign.
I took a poll in 2006. The election was in May of 2007. My own poll told me that I couldn't win.
And you still went for it?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I thought I could win.
In 2007, he ended up winning the election in a landslide with a plan to boost Philadelphia's graduation rate, lower its homicide count, and make the city greener. But any plan comes with surprise detours, twists, and turns. Mayor Michael Nutter's story is now on Philly Who. Support for this episode of Philly Who comes from Opera Philadelphia's Festival 019, happening now through September 29th. Zesty comedy, rare classics, and new music await you at venues across the city. Performances include the world premiere of Denise and Katya, an exploration of the dark side of social media, and don't miss Prokofiev's The Love for Three Oranges, an appealing fairy tale performed in the Historic Academy of Music. Festival 019 now through September 29th. Tickets are at operaphila.org. It's been more than 3 years since Michael Nutter has called himself the mayor of Philadelphia, but he's still out there chipping away at different problems in the city. He's got a seat with the Economic and Community Advisory Council, a team that works with the Federal Reserve Bank in Philly. He also teaches at Columbia University. In addition to that, he works as a national spokesperson for mayors in the United States. He served as a fellow for Drexel University, the Brookings Institution, and the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Chicago. He's appeared on CNN as a commentator, published an autobiography. There's more, but you get the point. Things get so busy that even little things like breakfast can end up forgotten.
I just had breakfast. I had 2 Philly pretzels.
Wow, that's the most Philly thing ever. I love it.
Part of the reason I was late.
Really? And you usually eat breakfast at 3 p.m.?
No, and please don't tell my wife that. No, I took some calls during what would have been lunch.
Yeah.
And then I got really hungry, and I didn't want to come on and be hangry.
So you were raised in West Philadelphia?
We're at the 36th Street.
Yeah.
I grew up about 25 blocks from here.
Wow. Can you tell me about the Philadelphia that you grew up in?
So my parents married in 56. I was born in 57. They came from South Philadelphia. I grew up with my grandmother, my mom's mother. They moved to 55th and Larchwood. I was born at Misericordia Hospital, 2 blocks down the street. And we were probably about the 3rd Black family on the block. I would say by the time I was around 10 or so, you start to pay attention to things going on around you. There might have been 3 white families left. One of the strongholds in the community was the local pharmacy, Snideman's Pharmacy. That was a real stabilizing force, I guess I would say, in the community. There was a Sims Food Market at the other end of the block. The drugstore was at 56 and Larchwood. The food market, which was an African-American family, the Sims family, they were at 55th on the corner there. There was a German food market. There was a meat store.
It sounds like a lot of small mom and pop type places.
Yeah, all generally on corners. Barbershop, all of the basics, kind of right there in the neighborhood.
Right.
And then if you really needed to kind of go shopping, unless you're going to go downtown, you went to 69th Street. We'd usually take the L and do some other shopping. I would say it was, not that I was paying attention to demographics and economics when I was
You were looking up voter profiles when you were 10?
No, not really. But, I'd say it was probably a middle class neighborhood. Pretty much everybody worked. I think none of our parents had gone to college. And we were all really children of the 60s and 70s. What that meant was John Kennedy was killed when I was in first grade. I was 10, turning 11 when Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, both killed in 68, Malcolm X in 65. So, I knew what was going on. I was paying attention. Vietnam War, Man on the Moon. Transition into the 70s, that's high school. Graduated from Catholic grade school, Transfiguration, and then went to St. Joe's Prep.
Yeah. What types of things did you like to do growing up?
Played a lot of football in the streets. Football, basketball. Used to go to a boys club on 22nd right off of Chestnut. Me and a group of guys, probably 5 or 6 of us. Sometimes we'd take the bus, but a lot of times we would walk.
Yeah.
So, 55th and Larchwood to 22nd and Chestnut.
Damn.
A lot of exercise.
Yeah.
But for us, quite frankly, it was really more about just exploring places outside of our neighborhood, the things that we would see and experience. Summertime, we spent a lot of time at the local rec center. It's a Sherwood Recreation Center.
Gotcha.
Has now been renamed Christie. Spent a lot of time in the Copps Creek Library. It was also kind of a dangerous time. There's a lot of gang war activity in Philadelphia,
really?
Late 60s into the 70s. Yeah. So
did that touch your life at all?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, mostly I learned how to run faster when I was a kid as a result of that kind of activity. There's no way that I could ever join a gang. My parents I wouldn't be sitting here with you today. 60th Street, Moon Gang, 59th Street, tons of gangs, and they were constantly kind of recruiting. And so, you really had to pay attention to where you went. I went to the prep for high school. It's at 17th and Girard. I had to take 3 different forms of transportation. Take the G bus to the L to downtown, and then either the number 2 or the Broad Street subway. You're going through a lot of neighborhoods and seeing a lot of people, and just navigating to be safe was a little bit of a challenge. During some of those years, there were 60, 70 young people killed in gang violence and warfare.
And what was your outlook on Philadelphia at this time?
This was also a time of great tension. Frank Rizzo had been police commissioner and then became mayor. There was a lot of concern if you were a young person. Again, these are, views of a preteen, teen, and this is around that time, not the views that I have today based on experience. But at that time, a young person was worried not only about the gangs, but at times, as a young African-American male, sometimes worried about the police. At that time, there were a lot of men in the community. And when you turned 11, 12, 13, there was something called the conversation, mostly with your dad, about what to do if you get stopped by the police, how to act, how to respond. And that basically you just wanted to survive the experience. No smart talk, no back talk. Yes, sir. No, sir. A lot of that. I'd been stopped by the police, any number of times, certainly as I got older and driving and that kind of thing. Based on other things I've done in life, I've come to greatly appreciate and respect the work that very brave men and women do, risking their lives to make sure the rest of us are safe. There's also no question that Philadelphia Police Department has significantly improved and transitioned, from a time when you were often just really scared.
Yeah. Do you remember having the conversation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very specifically with my father, sat me down and said, we need to talk about something. You're getting older, you're going to be out in the street. Soon you'll be driving. And we need to talk about how you navigate the streets of Philadelphia.
And how did you feel when you were saying that?
Also back in those days, it was a real tradition. There were guys who were like 3 or 4 years older than us, in the neighborhood, those we call old heads.
Right.
And so, although they actually weren't that old, right? So, you're 13, your old head might be 16.
Right. They seemed really old back then.
Yeah. And you were just glad to be able to hang out with them.
Right.
And they would talk about, their experiences, stuff with the police, stuff with girls, all kinds of things. And so different levels of education from your parents. And then to some extent, you had more real conversation with your boys, sitting on the steps, hanging on the corner, whatever the case may be. And all of that was a part of the larger education of a young man, at least in the, 60s, 70s in West Philly.
Now, on that point, did you have any inkling that you might be one who can actually affect any sort of change about all this?
at least in my early years, there was no reason for me to ever think that I would be doing any of the things that I subsequently did. When I look back on it, maybe there were some signs and traits of, future leadership. I was usually, when we would play games, football, halfball, stickball, more oftentimes than not, I was usually captain of my team, or I was a guy. It was me and somebody else. And, I'll take this one, you take that one, I'll take that one, that kind of thing. So there was some of that. I did well in school. So remember, I went to Catholic grade school.
Yeah.
In those days, primarily by nuns and a few lay teachers. I was in 8th grade. And we wanted whatever changes we wanted about whatever was going on. The details almost don't matter, right? But we had like a list of grievances, right? And so I'm organizing my classmates, and at school, we would sell pretzels and candy and all that other kind of stuff. And the money went wherever the money went, right? So I did some quick calculations trying to figure out, how much everybody spent per day, per week, per month. And I said, until we get these changes, we're going to boycott. We're not buying any more pretzels. We're not buying any more candy. We're going to bring this place to its knees. My 8th grade teacher, Sister Barbara, said, Michael, do I need to have a conversation with your parents about this activity that you're engaged in? No, Sister Barbara, we're good. So I think the protest lasted maybe about 2 days.
And that was your first political activity.
We were crushed.
And then you went and had a pretzel.
Right. Then I went and bought another pretzel.
So then you wound up going to the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
At first to study, was it engineering or biomedical?
I wanted to be a doctor. Not so much a physician, but I wanted to be a doctor. I had plans to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to open a medical equipment and devices company.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So
that's super specific.
But in the mind of a 17-year-old, my theory was I needed to know and understand medicine.
Yeah.
In order to be able to create these things and talk to the medical community, talk to doctors, et cetera, et cetera. So the theory was I'm going to go to medical school and learn medicine, but not necessarily see patients. I want to open a company.
So a 17-year-old wanted to sell medical devices.
Devices, equipment, surgical tools, instruments,
Where did that come from?
Well, I had always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I actually started a business in my parents' home when I was 16. They never knew about it.
What was it?
Yeah, it was just a product services company. If you see these ads on TV about like whatever, and it says use special code.
Yeah.
XYZ. So it's kind of one of those companies where I would not have to store inventory or product.
Right.
It's just getting orders. I had gotten a business license, had a fictitious name, did the advertisement in the newspaper.
You were doing the thing.
I was doing the thing. I had a phone in my room, my own phone in my room that I paid for because I was working at the drugstore.
Your parents didn't know this?
They knew about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Bell Telephone had to kind of come to the house.
Yeah. Like, how'd they get you pulled that?
Yeah. I said I needed to have my own phone in my room, separate from my parents' phone. So I always kind of had that entrepreneurial interest. I wanted to help people. And I thought that was a way to do that with, new medical equipment and devices, et cetera, et cetera. So the recruiter, usually 20, 30 guys would often get accepted to Penn out of the prep. And she said, fact of the matter is that the engineering school is trying to really step up their efforts to diversify their matriculation, their students. You have an interest already in engineering and science. I did very well in science in high school. I want to emphasize that very well in high school science. I got to admit it. And I was a biomedical engineering major, which was relatively new in the mid-'70s. My first class was chemistry, either 1 or 3, whatever the designation was.
Yeah.
And by mid-semester, it was pretty clear. First day of class, the room is packed. Every seat is filled. The students are sitting on the floor, in the aisles, et cetera, et cether. By mid-semester, you could sit anywhere you wanted.
Wow.
So it really is a weeding out kind of process. But more importantly, at least for me, the issue was that I was clearly on my way to failing the course.
Yeah.
And then one day when I was sitting in class and I looked up, there's a big table of elements chart. And I looked up at it and just like an epiphany, a moment. And I just looked at it and I said, I really don't give a damn about the table of elements. It was in that moment that I realized that I was not going to be a doctor. So I dropped the course and then immediately tried to transfer to Wharton because if I'm not going to be a doctor and I do really want to be an entrepreneur, why not go to the best business school in the country, if not the world, right?
Yeah.
So the slight flaw in the plan was by dropping the chemistry course, when I tried to transfer, Wharton said, we're not going to accept your transfer request because you did not maintain a full course load. You learn a lot on the way to trying to be slick. So they rejected my application. Then the engineering school found out that I tried to transfer. And so they sent me a note saying, we know you tried to transfer, and if you do that again, we're going to kick you out of school. So I said, oh, okay. This is getting more interesting. Welcome to the big leagues. Second semester, freshman year, I'm still in the engineering school, knowing that I really don't want to be there.
Wow.
So I tried to transfer again. Second application was rejected also for some reason. May have had something to do with grades, not sure. Way down the line, I did transfer into Wharton, and I was an entrepreneurial management major.
Wow. So did they not find out the second time? Because they said they were gonna kick you out, right?
When I went to try to transfer the second time to Wharton, I did a double transfer application, and the other one was to the School of Arts and Sciences.
Oh.
They have more space, more students, slightly higher acceptance rate. So Wharton rejected my application. Arts and Sciences approved my application. So I left engineering and went to Arts and Sciences, and then just continued to take a whole bunch of Wharton courses until they sent me a note saying, we notice you keep taking all these Wharton courses. You know, you're not a Wharton student. By the way, you haven't declared a major. So I said, okay, I'll be an economics major, because the economics major and all the courses are over the Wharton School.
Right.
So I started learning about systems and strategy. And so I think ultimately the number one thing I learned through all of that process was really how to think, know the rules, push the envelope a little bit. And it helps to, know a few people who can help guide you along the way.
There's always a way. Now, it's around this time that Mixmaster Mike came to be. Is that right?
This is true. So I remember I mentioned my friend Robert Bonham.
Yeah.
So we go to Penn together, roommate together. While we were at Penn, in the summer of 76, Robert's father, Ben, opened the first Black-owned discotheque called the Impulse Discotheque at Broad and Germantown in North Philadelphia. He closed a place that was called the Cadillac Club, which was a fantastic nightclub where, at the time, not so well-known artists like Aretha Franklin, Billy Paul, Lou Rawls, and a bunch of others performed. Closed it, gutted it out, and then turned it into the Impulse Discotheque. And Robert and I started working there in the summer of 76, shortly after it opened, cleaning the floors, cleaning the carpet, ashtrays, trash, stocked the bar, ice. We had house DJs who came in like around 10 o'clock, but the party really started around 7 or 8.
Right.
So whichever one of us was working, we played records until the house DJs came in. And that's led to the creation and debut of Mixmaster Mike.
Now, would you eventually start taking DJ a little more seriously, or did it continue to be?
No, it was only at the club, at that one club. But it's really kind of funny. There are people in Philadelphia who claim that they were at any number of parties that I DJ'd all over the city, which I truly find fascinating because I didn't own any, equipment, records, or anything. I only played at one place. It was a ton of fun. And, there is this saying that you should never let your schooling interfere with your education. I didn't know that saying at the time, but clearly, apparently, I was living by that philosophy. This was a club that was geared toward 30-plus-year-old crowd, and we were 19 years old.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, you were getting schooled.
I was definitely getting schooled.
Now, I think I read that it was there that you started getting the taste of like true politics. Is that right?
It is.
How is that?
So again, this is mid to late 70s into the 80s. There was a rise in Black political engagement here in the city. Senator Hardy Williams, father of State Senator Anthony, Charlie Bowser, John White Sr., Dave Richardson, Bill Gray, Marion Tasco, Augusta Clark, John Anderson. All of these people were stars or rising stars in the Black community. Charlie Bowser had run for mayor. Hardy Williams had run for mayor. And African-American candidates, some were winning and some not, but getting close, et cetera, et cetera. When the club opened, the Impulse, many of them had events and fundraisers at the Impulse Discotheque because it was at Broad Germantown and it was a Black-owned club. So I met and saw up close a lot of these folks at 19, 20, 21 years old, and would then read about some of them see them on TV or whatever the case may be. Politics was not the Nutter family business or anything. Nobody was in government. I paid a lot of attention to American government, watched TV, Watergate hearings, Vietnam War, et cetera, et cetera. So I always had an interest, but never thought about ever being involved in politics. But it was at the club, seeing these folks, listening to them, hearing what people were doing, certainly created a lot of interest. And then, graduated from college, went to work at Xerox, 17th and Market. While I was at Xerox, I was still working at the nightclub.
You were pulling
two
double
full-time
duty.
jobs. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I'd leave Xerox 5, 6 o'clock, go to the club, stay till 2:30, and then back to work.
Sheesh.
Yeah. About 21 months in at Xerox, I decided, well, there had been a series of promotions and all kinds of things, staff changes. And I decided that since they didn't see the brilliance of, making me a senior vice president at 24 years old, that I had really no future at this company. So I quit.
I've been there.
Yeah.
I think we all have.
I don't
Why
know.
aren't you putting me in charge? I know everything.
Right. So just slightly outrageous. So now I had daytime hours free because I was just working at the club, and started attending city council meetings just to kind of see what was going on down there. Robert and I, we had visions of grandeur and that we were going to become kind of real estate moguls. So we started going to sheriff sales. We had these ideas that we were going to buy some properties, cheap, and then we hadn't exactly worked out who was going to fix them up because it wasn't going to be either one of us.
Question mark.
Okay, well, we're not going to do that. But since we're in the building, let's go check out city council, see what's going on down there. And that was kind of wild and crazy in the early 80s. Abscam had happened. There was all kinds of consternation and fights down there. It was literal, figurative.
Wow.
And so I said, well, this is kind of interesting. And then I ran into a couple people at the city council session that I'd met while I was at the nightclub, right? So one day I went to see one of the city councilmen, John White Jr., whose father was heavily involved in the Black empowerment movement. And I said, all this political stuff, it seems really interesting to me. But, how do you get involved? How do you get started? And we talked about a few things. And then he said, well, where do you live? And I said, I'm out in the Winfield section. He said, oh, my next door neighbor lives out there. He's a councilman at large, my best friend down here. He's looking to recruit some people to, for his organization. You should go next door and talk to him. So I said, okay. Went next door, knocked on the door. I had no idea what he looked like, never heard of him, nothing. And of course, they knew even less about me, as in less than zero. He saw me.
Wow.
He saw me. And we started talking. He ultimately said, okay, well, where exactly do you live? And I told him I live right down on Conshohocken Avenue, not too far from where 6 ABC is. And he said, well, I really need somebody right where you live to run for this local neighborhood office to support my efforts to be more involved in the Democratic Party. He wanted to become the ward leader in the 52nd Ward. So I said, well, I'd be interested in that.
No way.
So he said, okay. So I ran. This lady crushed me, Lillian Levinsky. She was like probably in her 70s. I was like 24 or something like that. And most of the people who lived in the little area where we live were much older. People who had date of birth like 1901, 1898. And here's this 24-year-old kid. Like, why are you at my door? He then did not win the ward leader position that he was going for. So that was 82. 83 is time for him to run for re-election. Bill Green, Mayor Green, decides not to run for re-election in 83, which then set up this classic electoral battle, Wilson Goode and Frank Rizzo in 1983. And then my guy was running for re-election, Councilman Anderson, who then asked me to be his campaign manager. Of course, I thought it was absurd because I knew nothing about that and actually said no.
You did?
Yeah. I don't know anything about this.
Why did he ask you?
I think for a couple of reasons. I had volunteered in the office, young guy, interested, blah, blah, blah. It was the youth and the energy, and I had the interest. There were other people around. Senior, like serious, legitimate people, and they helped me and coached me and all that. So, as I said, he was a councilman at large, and we traveled all over the city. Now, I've been in Philadelphia all my life, but we went to places in Philly that I'd never seen and never heard about, didn't know what they were like or anything. And it was a incredible eye-opening experience, but also it was a real window into what public service is all about. And I mean, he was just a really good guy. So he won the Democratic primary that May. Wilson Goode won. I mean, this was like a big election in Philadelphia. And I decided on election night that this is what I want to do.
Wow. And at that point, you said, this is my career.
25 turning 26. Yeah.
Wow. It was only a few years later that you then ran for city council.
So the summer of 83, after the councilman won the Democratic primary, we talked and we developed a game plan that I was going to run 4 years later for the district seat out in our neighborhood for the 4th district. He was at large, so I wouldn't be in that race, of course. And that in 1987, I would run for city council. Unfortunately, he died 5 months after the election in October of 83. I did run in 87 against an incumbent, came close, but lost. And then ran 4 years after that in 91 in a rematch. It was incredible. Just a really, really great feeling. You know, we'd worked really, really hard. I didn't appreciate it at the time, of course. But, you know, as I say, most of the time you learn more from a loss than from a win.
Yeah.
But I really hate losing. So, you know, the 87 loss was pretty tough. But
you did it again. So you must have been, I mean, if you would have lost again, that would have hurt.
Yeah, like a lot. The second time out, I mean, we raised more money than she did. The first campaign, I knocked on 10,000 doors. The second one, I knocked on 20,000 doors. Wow. 4 of the 5 mayoral candidates endorsed my campaign. I mean, we were just really working our butts off. And I mean, I certainly felt that we had put ourselves in position to be able to win. I thought we would win, but you know, you can't take anything for granted.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun.
Now, at what point in that period did you start thinking that you might want to try to become the mayor of Philadelphia?
I can, you know, fairly well pinpoint it. After the bug scandal in 2003, you know, the FBI found a bug in the mayor's office and all that controversy. And that was so tremendously embarrassing. And then all the subsequent indictments and all the other things that were going on. The homicide rate was going up in the early 2000s as compared to most other cities. It was going down. So I worked on domestic partnership legislation, police advisory commission, ethics reform, and campaign finance reform, just a bunch of other things. And, you know, I was a district councilman, so, you know, a fair amount of activity in the district, you know, and I was getting into my late 40s, been on council for 10, 11, 12 years. And so, yeah, you just kind of get to a point, what do you think you want to do? In the aftermath of all the scandals on the ethics side, and then just really kind of taking stock of the incumbent mayor, if they run for re-election, if I don't run now, somebody wins and they'll be there 8. So that means I'm sitting on the council floor for another 8 years complaining about you know, whatever they're doing or not doing. I thought I might kind of be ready. I had some ideas. I was committed to safety and education and jobs. And I just said, you know, I think I'm just going to take a chance.
Yeah. Now, going into that primary, I think I read that there were 5 candidates.
5 of us, yeah.
What were your odds, would you say, at that point?
I took a poll in 2006. The election was in May of 2007.
Right.
My own poll told me that I couldn't win. Pretty much no matter who ran, in a 5-way race, you would probably be last.
And you still went for it?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I thought I could win. You know, poll is a snapshot in time of kind of where people are and what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. I often talk about this with young people about, you know, their lives and their futures. And what I say is, I usually ask, you know, does anybody in the class know what an EKG is? And, you know, a couple of hands will go up and it says something about your heart. And I said, but they've not developed a test yet that can determine your heart, your soul, your drive, your commitment, your focus. No one was ever going to outwork me in that race. I was going to get up earlier than anybody else. I'd stay up later than anybody else. I'd knock on more doors if I had to. I'd go to more transit stops. I thought we could raise the money. And so, you know, poll can't tell you that. Crime was up. Corruption was an issue. I had actually done some things in both of those areas. And so my issue was, even though I'd been on council for 14 years, I was only a district councilman. There's a whole big city out there. It's only 1/10 of the city. Yep. And so part of it was a lot of people just didn't know who I was.
Right.
Well, that's why I resigned early in order to be a full-time candidate longer and be out on the field. So I was the first announced. The poll was in May. I resigned in June. And right after 4th of July, I announced that I was running for mayor. So I was the first one out there.
Right. And the legend has it that you were out there putting in 20-hour days, talking to people, handing out Nutter Butters, right?
Yeah, Nutter Butters.
When did you feel the tide turn?
things changed pretty dramatically for us when the commercial with our daughter Olivia aired. It was the third commercial that we ran. And that commercial really did change things for us. People started paying attention. They thought she was beautiful. She is. She told my story in 30 seconds better than I could in an hour.
Wow.
She's got a family, takes his daughter to school, cares about public education, grew up in a row house in Philly. I don't know where people thought I grew up, but grew up in a row house in Philly. So I think sometimes, all these credentials and things can, if people don't really know who you are, they say, well, we went to a prep school, he went to the University of Pennsylvania. He's some other guy. No, I'm the guy that grew up at 55th and Larchwood. There were 70 mayoral forums. I participated in 68 of them. Neil Oxman and the JJ Balaban and the team at the campaign group did a fantastic job. I had the most passionate staff and volunteers. And I think people really did want a change. Yeah. Somehow the message broke through. And then our polling told us that I was a lot of people's second choice, only because they didn't think I could win, so they didn't want to waste their vote. And then an independent poll came out in April that said it was a 2-point race between me and Tom Knox.
Wow.
And then things dramatically shifted. Folks said, the guy actually could win. I said, yeah, if you vote for me.
Yeah.
So, more money started pouring in, and we were able to keep more ads on TV and all that. And then probably about 2 weeks out, our pollster told me, to like 4 of us, that based on current projections, you're going to win.
And your first thought?
Ignore that. And keep working.
You got 2 weeks left. So you do.
You can do anything for 2 weeks.
Right. So you wind up winning. You take the reins in early 2008. You're given the keys to the 5th largest city in the country from somebody who thought he'd get into politics, no background in politics.
It is a frightening prospect.
What's that like?
As I was standing on the stage, and the Academy of Music, which is an incredible venue, just being there, let alone being on the stage, right? So, and I'd been sworn in, 4 times before that, and taken the oath, but as I was standing there, and I know the oath well, and the judge is reading it, and then you repeat it, and left hand on the Bible, right hand up in the air, and it was so surreal. And with every word in my head, I was thinking, you're about to become the mayor of the 5th largest city in the United States of America, birthplace of freedom, liberty, and democracy. Holy. And my hand was kind of shaking a little bit as I was saying it. Like I said, I know it well. So, and I know when it's coming to an end. Yeah. And after I say that last word,
you're it.
This is it. The reason I'm still amazed, even, all these years later, is I don't see how a little kid from 55th and Larchwood ends up being mayor of his hometown. I don't know what that path was. I just don't know how something like that really happened. And I've been very, very fortunate, very blessed.
You wound up taking the reins. Your first term wound up being the Great Recession.
Yeah, I'm not the best on timing.
So what is that like? That had to have been a trying time.
It was unlike anything. I mean, it was 2.5 years easily of just torture. I had championed the cause to cut taxes during pretty much all my city council career. I'm now the guy that's raising people's taxes 4 years in a row. We're cutting services. We're raising fees and fines and taxes and making all kinds of decisions that you really don't want to make. But, the lesson there is you don't always get to do what you want to do. I mean, there's no way to plan for the worst recession since the Great Depression, right? But there were some lessons learned. And when I came into office in 92 as a city council member, the city had its own financial crisis. Had nothing to do with the country or the world or anything else. We had our own. And I did go through that experience, and I did learn some things. And we used some of those same strategies and tactics during our trying time. The reason us were able to get through it is because I had just the most fantastic team of people to work with. And ultimately, for any organization, its success is a function of the people who are around, who are involved, who are committed. And I had a totally dedicated team of folks who were empowered to make decisions, certainly empowered to tell me no or tell me I was wrong. I pretty much lost most battles to them because they were smarter. And we respected each other and trusted each other.
Yeah.
And that, I think, made all the difference in the world.
Term number 2 was the opposite, right? prosperity, you'd say,
things,
right?
Things kind of bottomed, if you will, 10 into 11.
Right.
I mean, we just found what I would often refer to as the new normal. We weren't going down. We'd stabilized.
Leveled off.
And then we could see it. We could see it in the numbers. Going into 2012, tax collections were up. The job market was starting to come back. People were still moving to Philadelphia. We could start making finally some investments.
Yeah.
We restarted the tax cut program, wage tax reduction program rather. And you could just feel a certain level of optimism. Rating agencies, because of our fiscal discipline, actually upgraded us.
Wow.
Coming out of the recession, one of the few cities in the country to have that. We were at an A rating from all three rating agencies for the first time since the 70s.
Yeah.
Wage tax levels were at 30-year lows. And then we just started seeing all of this construction activity taking place and building permits. At the same time, 12 into 13 is when we had a huge drop in homicides. So in 2013, we were at 247, which was the lowest since 1967. And we kind of stayed in that range for the rest of my time. High school graduation rate was going up. Population growth continued through that time. And the second term was definitely different than the first one.
Yeah, you come towards the end of it and you see, you see what you've gone through in the early stage and see these numbers improving the way that you dreamt for them to improve when you first ran to be mayor.
Yeah.
What goes through your head?
I think you learn the tough lesson of you can only control what you can control. No one could do anything about a worldwide recession. The question is, what do you do with what you have? How do you stay focused, not get distracted by all the noise and other activity out there? I said at the first inauguration that we needed as a goal to have a 30 to 50% reduction in homicides. That as a goal, we should be shooting for 80% high school graduation rate. That we could seek to increase our population by, nearly 75,000 people. That we needed more Philadelphians to get back to work. That we would be the number one green city in America, and that we would run the government with integrity. When I left, we had a 32% reduction in homicides. We reached 68% high school graduation rate, up from the mid-50s. There were more Philadelphians working than had been in 20 years. I think we did clean up the government a good amount. No place is perfect. Philadelphia is recognized as one of the greenest, most sustainable, and leading-edge cities in the world. And we pretty much did the things that we said we were going to do. For me, that's a really good feeling.
At your last press conference, you said, I've become just much more personally emotional during the course of the last 8 years. And I still don't know what that's about, but I found myself in any number of moments, possibly on the verge of tears. It's been a couple of years. Do you think you now know what that was?
Maybe a little bit. I think it was a combination of, my first full year in office, we lost 4 police officers killed in the line of duty. Our daughter was 12 when I got elected, and, kind of watched her grow into a pretty mature teenager. That's a whole process in and of itself. I watched and experienced a bunch of young people who came in, either to the campaign or to the government in their 20s, and in many instances are now in their 30s as we're about to leave. Some of whom, I performed their weddings, watched them grow, saw the city that I love passionately transform to some extent right in my face. Just to know, that you had an opportunity to serve. There is something really special, I think, about being mayor of your hometown. But for me, there was always something just a little extra because it's Philadelphia. And I do take seriously that it is the birthplace of freedom, liberty, and democracy. And so I think being mayor of Philadelphia is just a little more special than being mayor of just about anywhere else. And I think there's an extra level of responsibility. But like most Philadelphians, I'm very passionate about this city and kind of rise and fall with the moods of the city. The fact of the matter is that 400,000 people who still struggle with basic literacy. There are 300,000 folks who have a previous criminal record. We have the highest poverty rate of the 10 largest cities in the United States of America, and we've been over 20% for now 40 years. You can't rest. You can't take it easy. You've got to maintain that passion. I've had to talk to parents and apologize to them for the death of a child because we didn't protect them properly, and then try to catch the killer. I mean, there are so many things that are really seared in my heart and soul. The tragedy at 22nd and Market, the Amtrak derailment. We lost 8 police officers in my 8 years, killed in the line of duty, 4 firefighters, a PGW employee, and a fleet manager. I was in the hospital room with every one of those families, every time.
Wow.
Every funeral, every gravesite. I've seen a few things during that time. And if they don't touch you emotionally, then, I think there might be something wrong with you.
Yeah.
What always excites me about Philadelphia is our resilience, the passion that people have about this city. I saw that time and time and time again, even through the recession, when people were really upset with me. And I understood why. It was just their passion about the city and what they want and what they expect. And I don't ever think that will wane or go away. I think we need to stay very, very focused on issues of public safety, issues of education, income inequality, and poverty. There are so many, many more people who want to, fulfill their life potential, who want to be on the field, who want to be actively engaged. I'm on the Economic and Community Advisory Council for the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank here in Philadelphia. And it is slightly bizarre, but there are actually more jobs available than there are people to take them.
How does that work?
Employers are finding it difficult to find employees. And there's a skill set mismatch for many of these jobs. But there's also, I think, a misnomer to some extent out in the community that many of these jobs, still good jobs, don't necessarily require a 4-year degree.
Right.
There's certificates that people can get. And so how we get that word out and how we let people know, I mean, they can move themselves and their families out of, a challenging economic circumstance. We hear these numbers, unemployment's the lowest it's been in, whatever. But we know in West Philly and North Philly and South Philly, river wards, upper North Philadelphia, we know that unemployment is 20, 30, 40%. I mean, there are a ton of folks in the city who are not working. And so we have to figure out how to get, that population into some of the jobs that exist. But there are a bunch of employers who cannot find employees.
Right. Well, sometimes I wonder, shouldn't we also get the jobs to them, right? Because it's really a tale of two cities. People consider Philly, a lot of people just consider Philly just these few neighborhoods in between, and there's way more to it. Yeah.
And then just also sometimes the personal challenges that people have. Yes, I'd like to work, but how am I going to get there?
Right.
The jobs over here, obviously people can't see it's a podcast, but moving my hands around, the jobs in one part of the city, the daycare somewhere else,
that's huge.
Transportation challenges. And then whatever the wage is, literally, is it worth it? Right. So I have a job, but now my costs could literally exceed, kind of what I'm making. And so I'm the eternal optimist. I've seen this city in so many different ways, and still.
And you're here. I'm here. Still working on this stuff.
Yeah. I have a fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania's School of Social Policy and Practice. Actually, my wife and I are actively engaged in a project focused on income inequality and social mobility at Penn. And you'll be hearing more about that, later this year into next year. But for me personally, I feel that much of that work is unfinished work on my part. And I've chosen to stay actively engaged in a different way in the public arena, and I still want to help improve the lives of others. I've been given a lot, and so I owe a whole lot back, and it's a way for me to give back.
Last thing, one message, every Philadelphian, what do you say?
Go Eagles.
If you like the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow along on Twitter and Instagram at PodPhillyWho and join the email newsletter at podphillywho.com. Here's a very special thanks to Philly Who's patrons: Sam Schwartz, Josh Koppelman, Bob Moore, Alex Hillman, Vanessa Generelli, Ryan Fitzgerald, and Matt Glick. If you'd like to join them in supporting the show, you can do so at patreon.com/PhillyWho. Philly Who is a Q9 production. This episode was recorded in the Philly Who studio, powered by CIC, and was hosted and produced by me, with associate production by Angela Gervasi and Jackson Neal, editing by Max Graham, artwork by Lauren Carhart, and a very special thanks to Luke Butler. For Philly Who, my name is Kevin Schmidlin. See you next time.